At the time this episode was created, it was estimated that over 3 million children have been stolen and forced into sex and labor trafficking. You're going to meet a man whose mission and purpose is rescuing those children and restoring them back to their God-given identity and purpose in love. He will share his experience in rescuing over 11,000 children in just a moment, so don't go anywhere.
Welcome to the Fatherhood Challenge, a movement to awaken and inspire fathers everywhere to take great pride in their role and to challenge society to understand how important fathers are to the stability and culture of their family's environment. Now, here's your host, Jonathan Guerrero.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. My guest is author, pastor, and modern-day child slavery abolitionist, Troy Brewer. Troy is also the founder of Troy Brewer Ministries, an organization committed to rescuing, nurturing, and sheltering trafficked children. Troy, thank you so much for being on the Fatherhood Challenge.
Jonathan, what a great privilege it is. Thank you so much for having me, my friend.
Okay, here's one of my favorite questions to start off. What is your favorite dad joke?
I have some awesome dad jokes because we actually send out a dad joke every single week on a like this robocall thing. But you know what? I don't know that this is a dad joke, but it's something I say all the time, and it's so real. Is I used to be extremely fat. I used to be like between 400 and 500 pounds, and I used to tell everybody I was worldwide before the internet. That's what I tell them. It's true. It's absolutely true. All right.
Well, Troy, what is your story behind why and how you were called to start your ministry as a pastor and rescuing children?
Well, you know what, Jonathan? I didn't intend on rescuing kids. It was just something that God just brought me off into. What I intended on doing was building food banks all over the world. And I have a knack for building food banks. I played in a Christian rock band from 86 until 91. And we traveled the world. We did all kinds of cool stuff. And my favorite thing was actually doing the gigs where we were feeding people. And so I started a food bank here in Johnson County, Texas, which I know that you're very familiar with. You grew up in Keene, you were telling me before we went on air, which is crazy. I mean, we're both Johnson County boys.
Absolutely.
That's crazy. Yeah, so I grew up about 10 miles from you in Keene. I grew up in Joshua, Texas, and that's also where our food bank is. And the people that were giving me food and they started asking me, hey, man, do you do a work in Central America? And I was like, well, no, not really, but I could. And they're like, we would give you food there if you would start a food bank there. So I went down to Costa Rica, started a food bank. We went into the trash dumps to feed everybody and to invite people to start coming and getting food from us. And while I was there, a lady tried to sell me 2 little Nicaraguan refugee girls. And she walked up to me and said, hey, you want to buy these kids? And she was talking in Spanish. And I was thinking, I'm not hearing this right. I'm not translating it right. And sure enough, that's what she was trying to do. And then she said, you could make a movie. And when she said that, I was like, wow, my first reaction was I wanted to run off screaming like, my head was on fire. But I didn't. I stood there and looked at her and I said, yeah, I'll buy them right now. How much? And she says $60.
Wow.
And I reached in my back pocket and I pulled out $120 and I bought those 2 little girls and literally walked across the trash dump with them, holding their hands. They were both 9 or 10 and little bitty skinny things. They were starving. And they just went with me. And I went and took them to my wife and said, look at this, and told my team, said, this actually just happened and we got to take care of these kids. To make a very long story short, we got them into a home. And then every time I went into a trash dump, I just started looking and they were there. And before long, we had 4, then we had 10, then we had 20. And now we have raised thousands and thousands. We've rescued over 11,000 kids, and that was 30 years ago. So yeah, that's how it all got started. You're a believer. I'm a believer. We have been redeemed. We have been saved. We've been pulled out of the trash dumps and given a different life, and that's what Jesus does. So to me, it's a perfect demonstration of Jesus and his kingdom. And it's a joy. It's not always a joy. But it's always a terrible privilege. And there are times, that it's very difficult. There's been very difficult challenges through the years. There's always difficulty in funding this thing because, raising kids is a money pit. And I have 4 biological kids, and then I have over 4,400 kids that are in homes all across the world. And it's just a huge money pit. It's one thing to rescue a child. It's another thing to actually raise that child and to put them in a home that you would put your own grandchildren in. And those kinds of challenges, though, are actually the least of the challenges that we have faced in raising these kids. And so it's a lot. I would say the majority of the cases that we have throughout the world, it's actually the parents that are actually trafficking the kids. And so you cannot send them back. You can't take them back. You can't be a part of it. And so there's no cookie cutter way to rescue kids and to raise kids. Every single one of them have a specific need, and they have specific challenges, and you have to be willing to be like Semper Gumby, through the whole thing. You got to be always ready, always prepared to be flexible concerning the needs of every single child and what their situation is.
We love stories on the Fatherhood Challenge. Please share some stories of some of the girls that you have rescued.
I would say one of my favorite rescue stories is one of the first times I rescued somebody in India. I had a driver, and his name was Prakash. And Prakash's job was to get me at 5 different churches on a Sunday, starting in the morning, and they just work you like a government mule when you go over there to India. They line you up with 2,000 gigs, and I literally would have to get an IV. I would be so dehydrated. It was so hot. And I've learned since then, no, I'm not doing that anymore. But back in the day, when I was still young, Prakash was taking me to 5 different churches. We were on our 3rd or our 4th church. I want to say actually our 2nd or our 3rd or our 3rd church. We're headed towards our 3rd church is what it was. And he just nonchalantly, as we passed this building, he said, "That is a house of ill repute," which those are not terms that I would use. I was like, and his accent was so harsh. It's like, "This is a house of ill repute." And I was like, "What?" And I was like, repeat that. I was like, "Are you telling me that that's a cat house?" And he said, "They are not having cats there." And I was like, I know what I said. I've been growing up a long time, Prakash. I know what goes on in there. And instantly, I call it, I'm just going to weird out so just you put up with me, okay, Jonathan? I had the Lord show me 3 things like flashcards, and it was little girl. There is a little girl. She is a little girl, and she has been abducted, and you're going to walk out with her. And I just told him, I just instantly thought that, boom, boom, boom. And it was like 3 things in a row. And I went, "Turn around, I want to go in there." And he said, No. I said, "Turn around, I want to go in there." And so he turned around and he was thoroughly disgusted with me, thinking, "Oh yeah, the great American pastor, he's got to stop by a cat house, in between churches, And I told him, keep the car running. And so he just put it in park, and I went in there. Well, they had a bar, the first part of it was a nice room. There were some couches in there. There was some young girls in there, meaning late teenage girls, early 20s. And they were in there, and I walked in there, and I'm just going to tell you and tell your audience, I went straight up to the bar and started talking to everybody in there. Like, "Hey, what's going on? I'm from Texas. Where y'all from? Hey," and I got that kind of a personality, and I'm just trying to see, is it possible? Is there actually a child that I can rescue here? Because I felt like that God had shown that to me. And so I asked them, "Hey, do you have any little girls?" And they said, "Well, how little?" And I said, "Do you have any little ones?" And they said, "Yeah, well, we actually have 2 girls and a boy, and the one of them is sick. And so you can't see her. And the other 2 are in school. Now, school only goes to the 7th grade. So these are 6th graders or below." And I'm like, "Well, what about this sick one? What about that one?" And they're like, "Well, she's not prepared, and she hasn't been here very long, and she hasn't learned the proper protocols." And I'm like, "Oh, you got a difficult one. I want to see this difficult one." And I'm just talking to them. And they went, "Okay." So they're gone about 15 minutes. They come back. They walked me down this hall. And Jonathan, I'm telling you right now, I was horrified. When I left that room, they took me down a hall, and then I went down another hall, and this other hall was dark. And I am passing doors that have padlocks on the outside of the doors. And I'm thinking, okay, there is 3 guys with me now. And one of them, I'm thinking, I can take this guy. I can break his jaw. That's what I'm thinking. The next guy, I'm like, I don't know. And the third guy, I'm like, I'm running from that dude. I'm going to have, these guys are going to kill me. And I'm like, I'm just a pastor. I don't even know what the heck I'm doing. This is 20 something years ago. And I'm like, this is craziness. We get all the way down the hall, the very last door, all the way down the hall, which was considerably, it was a long ways to me. It was. The door was open. There was one light hanging down from the ceiling, and it was a blue light. And the reason why it was blue was because this little girl was so beat up, and this little girl was so sick, and she was so starving, and they didn't want me to see how bad she looked. And she was wearing a white dress, and she was sitting on the edge of this little bitty tiny cot bed with her hands like this, and she was just sitting here, just in her hands, like the way that you would hold them in prayer, perhaps. And I said, oh, so there she is. And I was like, so I started talking to him, and I was like, and they're like, okay, well, we'll leave you. And I was like, no, I'm taking her with me. Let's go. And they're like, no, you're not taking her anywhere. I'm like, yes, I am. I'm like, this place is filthy. I'm a guy with money. I have a nice hotel. I'm taking her with me. And they're like, well, that's not possible. I'm like, it is possible. Like, here it is. Like, how much? I just start forking out money. And by the grace of God, they just said, yeah, give me that wad of cash and you can take her. And like, when will you be back? We'll send somebody with you, of course. Will you be back in 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours? And I said, I'll be back in 4 hours. And they said, okay. Well, I walked out with her and I got to the car, but they didn't follow me immediately. They were like holding this. There was like this wild thing that happened where they were just kind of standing there, like looking at each other like a couple of drunken hillbillies over this wad of cash. And they're looking like kind of like laughing, like, oh my gosh. And dude, I just walked out with her and I went out, got in the car. Prakash would not allow me to get in the car when he saw that I had this girl with me. He's like, no. I'm like, yes. He finally opened up the door. I said, let's go. My heart was about to literally jump out of my throat. We drove off and the guy didn't follow us. And I had Prakash translate for me. And I said, is that your family that's in there? And she said, no. And I said, what are you doing in there? And she said, I came to clean. They came to my village and they said I was going to clean. She said, but I haven't cleaned anything. And I said, how long have you been in there? And she said she didn't know. And I said, has it been a day? Has it been a month? She just kind of shrugged her shoulders. And I'm like, tell me how long you've been here. And she said she didn't know. She didn't have any idea. We're talking like a 10-year-old child, And I said, well, you're going to remember this day for the rest of your life. She's not saying anything. Prakash is translating. I said, do you know who Jesus is? And she said, no. I said, well, he knows you. And he sent me from the other side of the world to come over here and to get you. He's been watching you for a long time. And he sent me over here to get you. And I just got you. And I'm going to take you to a home where nobody is ever going to hurt you again, ever. And I know that you're sick and there's going to be a doctor there and we're going to eat. Nobody's going to hurt you. And she didn't like, ooh, yay. I mean, she didn't know what to think about any of it. She didn't have a clue. I mean, she just like, whatever. Prakash took me to a home that we have. It's a transition home when kids get out of high school and when they get into college. We have a home in Vishakhapatnam or outside of Vishakhapatnam, India, that has these college-age girls in it. And I want to tell you, Jonathan, those girls love me. I've known them since they were a little bitty. And when we pulled up there, I went in there and they were so excited I was there. And I told them, hey, you're not going to believe what I just did, which was crazy. And I said, and that little girl's in a car and she is terrified. She's been traumatized and we got to help her. And I said, I want her to have her own bed. And they're like, okay. And I was like, I want y'all to treat her like a queen. I went outside to the car, went and got her, brought her into the house, and all those girls, these beautiful, beautiful, beautiful 20, 21-year-old girls, 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old girls in these beautiful saris, and they all started clapping for her. They were all clapping for her. And that was the first time that I saw any life in that little girl. And they were all hugging her and they were all talking to her and saying, no, you listen, we know Papa Troy and you're going to live here with us and it's going to be okay. You're going to be okay. You're not going back. And she was asking, I'm not going back there. And they're like, no, you're not going back. You're going to stay here with us. And so I left. And we had a doctor come, all those kinds of things. I came back about 5 days later or 7 days later, something like that, because I traveled the whole country. On the way back, as I was flying out, we stopped at there, and I went, I got to check on that little girl. And she came out and she hugged me and would not let go of me. And she asked me in Telugu, and all the other girls started laughing. And I said, what did she say? And she said, she wants to know if you're Jesus. That was probably my favorite.
She saw Jesus in you.
Yeah, she's a cool girl too. She's married and grown up now, and she's cool. I haven't seen her in probably 10 years. But that, man, I got on a plane and I was just sitting on the plane, man, the whole way, just going, what have you done, God, to put me in this position? Number one, I was happy I didn't get killed because I was way out of my league. I'm not like I get all this credit for rescuing all these kids. I don't actually rescue the kids. I rescue the rescuers that rescue the kids. That's what I do. But in this case, I actually rescued this kid. And I've rescued some kids, but not like what everybody else does. But I didn't go in there and rescue them by kicking down the door and beating somebody up, or walking around in there with a gun. We just did some business. You could just do some business. And I mean, you can buy a human being for $3,000 every single day of the week. I'm talking about you can go into a room where they bring in girls, and you sit in there and you got as much cash as you can carry. I did this in northern India, right on the Nepalese border. And everybody in there's got a phone. Everybody in there's got FaceTime, and they got an Arab on the other end, and they're bidding on these girls. And they give you a piece of paper, and it's like a car market. It says, this one is 14, and she has hazel eyes and black hair, and this is her weight, and this is her height. And this one is 17, and it's literally like a car market, and you just bid on them, and you're just hoping you don't run out of money. And you do run out of money. And then you leave there knowing there was a bunch more people I could have rescued if I'd have had the money, or this, that, yeah, we did that. We did that for years. And then the word got out, what we were doing. And then because those girls that we would rescue, they would know where other kids were. And then we started working with governments. And then we literally started hiring security teams. And then I started building my own security teams and building my own security companies. And like in Uganda, I have a security company, and we had to put all that stuff together. So going back to that one story, when I came back after rescuing that little girl, I was like, this is all I want to do for the rest of my life. This is it. I had no more ambitions. I had no more aspirations. And whatever I was going to do, I wanted to do it to create awareness and to fund rescuing kids.
I know there's another side to this. What happens to the traffickers? What does justice look like? And how has Jesus been involved?
Well, depending upon which country that they're in, people deal with trafficking differently. So, like in Nepal, for example, you have to pay a prosecuting attorney to actually prosecute. You have to pay for it. And so like the victims have to pay a prosecuting attorney. Of course they have a constitution, of course they have a rule of law, but the prosecuting attorneys are paid for by the victim. And that's one of the reasons why people come from all over the world to snatch kids out of Nepal, is because the poor people that they are molesting will never be able to hire a lawyer. They'll never be able to defend themselves. So a ministry like mine can come in and say, I got a wad of cash. And I say, we throw these jokers under the bus. And then you do. And everybody starts freaking out. Like, what? Like, why would you come over here and pay for the justice of somebody you don't even know? Well, because you don't know Jesus, and we do. And this is what he does. And so like all of our, not all of our funding, but a lot of our funding that goes to Nepal actually is to pay for the prosecution. Closer to home, like in Mexico and in places like Belize and Nicaragua and Colombia and Peru and Brazil, you have to develop relationships with prosecuting attorneys. And then hopefully you can get to the attorney general. You can get as high as the attorney general. Last week I had a conference and we had the attorney general of the state of Durango, Mexico, was actually here. She actually came up here, and she's a godly woman. She's incredible, and she is the attorney general. Okay, well, let me tell you, she has an agenda to stop cartels and to stop trafficking. And so it's super important that we as Christians support those people in government positions that are willing to actually risk their necks in fighting trafficking. So now that I've said all of that, tell you that I am for it 10,000%. I am for the prosecution. And also too, if I can just say this, I honestly don't think that rehabilitation should be an option to someone who molests a child. I believe that you go biblical. I'm all about cement shoes. Now that I've said that, that's not the option. What is the option is to make sure that they are separated from society and they never get a chance to hurt any more children ever again. And we have to support those people that support those laws that are in government places.
How can dads keep their own children safe and or the kids that they may serve in other settings, such as church and other organizations?
How you protect your kids is, number one, you are highly involved within your kid's life, and you can smell out a red flag just if you're really involved. If you're not really involved, I want to tell you, these guys are going to be smarter than you, and they're going to get them, and you can't let them get them. You got to be involved. You need to have some simple policies. Just because your kid wants to be on the internet, all the time, doesn't mean that you have to let them. And just because your kid wants to have they're on this and they're on that or whatever it comes to their accessibility to the web, doesn't mean that they just get to have those gates open in their life because their friends have that. I know exactly what fuels child trafficking. I know exactly what funds child trafficking. And I know exactly what builds the market for child trafficking. And it is pornography. That's what it is. And there could be no place within our own sexuality as dads privately that we give place to pornography. And it's going to be hard because we have the need for instant self-gratification. And you're going to have to fight that. And you got to teach your kids to fight that. And you got to tell them, you know what, dude, you're going to be an alpha male. You're going to be married one of these days. You're going to have your sexuality is awesome. I don't hate your sexuality. It's awesome. But this right here, this pornography thing, that's a no. We're not doing that. And then to actually, because I know what pornography is, because I rescue kids out of pornography. I know what it is. I also know this too. Every bit of trafficking is funded by pornography because of monetization. So we think, hey, look, I'm not buying anything. I'm not participating. I'm just a dude and I'm looking at these images and yeah, that's awesome. And sorry, but I really like that. I'm a guy and I like that. For every second that you spend watching pornography, you are literally funding a crime scene. That's what you're doing. And the word of God says, not only do those who do such terrible things receive judgment, but those who take pleasure in it. That's what the Bible says. It's like, you can't say, I'm against trafficking, but I think it's very entertaining and gratifying to watch a slave be treated like that. You're like, well, they're not slaves. Yes, they are. Yes, I know what I'm talking about. There's not a single little girl on the planet Earth that says, when I grow up, I want to be a porn star. They're slaves and they're drug addicted and they're this and they're that. And there's all those kinds of things. The other part of that too, Jonathan, is that, since our borders have been open, they're closed now. But for the past 4 years, our borders have been just completely open. They have the open borders is not just that people can get into the country. Open borders is there's no accountability of what goes back and forth, what goes back and forth. And that's something that people just don't realize. I realize it because I do work on the border and I know what it is. So a big part of open borders is this. If you stay addicted to pornography long enough, you will be led to lusting after children. It leads you down that road to actually viewing children and actually being a part of that. That is the road that pornography takes every single human being on. You stay in there long enough. Then you know what you do? You also learn how to surf the web and you learn how to get into the dark web through pornography. That's how you learn. And then after a while, you learn how to find the dark web on your apps. And then you have something like Instagram. And then you get to viewing a child, you get to liking a child, and then somebody contacts you and says, come down here to McAllen, Texas, and be on the border and be within a mile and contact us. Go down there to the border and you sit there, you get on Instagram. They say, you like this little girl? You like this little boy? Do you like this? And you say, yes, I do. And then they come across the border, they pick you up, they take you across the border, you lay your money down and you spend the day molesting a child. And then you come back. All of that is pornography driven. Every single bit of it is porno driven. And pornography takes advantage of everybody's vulnerability. Everybody's. So if a guy goes down to the border, Jonathan, and if a guy actually does that and he gets proficient enough at surfing the dark web, who he was introduced through pornography, and now he's actually lusting after a child and he's intrigued with the sexuality of a child, and then he actually makes the journey, I promise you that's not the last time he's going to go down there and he's going to do that. What's going to happen is studies have shown that person is going to return 70 more times. 70. That's the average. So it's got to be stopped. Somebody has to stand up. Somebody has to intervene. And until we actually recognize that pornography is after our kids, until we actually say, let me tell you what it's actually all about. It is not about adult entertainment of consenting adults and like, you know what, that's just kind of a cool. No, that's not what it is. If that's all it was, it would shut down the entire porno industry. It's a lot like abortion clinics. They're like, well, actually, we're all about family health and all that. And then we do abortions on the side. Okay, you take abortion out of abortion clinics, they all shut down. You take child sexuality out of pornography, I'm telling you, you shut down pornography.
How can dads learn more about Troy Brewer Ministries, get your books, or get involved?
Well, you can just go to Troy Brewer, just troybrewer.com, and that's probably the easiest way. And I want to just encourage you guys to do that. Go there and check us out. And we got rescue stories and videos. It will direct you to other sites that I have. And just get plugged in. It's pretty easy. Just go to troybrewer.com.
Troy, as we close, what is your challenge to dads listening now?
My challenge to dads is just this. I would just say this. You know what? Our God, it's God's idea for us to be a father. It's his idea for him to be our father. And there is no way that you're going to reach your kids for Jesus if you're not going to be a father to them. Your kids are going to be like, yeah, that's a cool scripture, but you're a terrible dad. What's real is any single one of us on any given day of the week, we can decide today's the day I'm going to be a good dad. Today is the day that I'm going to be selfless concerning my kid. Today is the day I'm going to be a leader when it comes to my child. And today is a day that I'm going to recognize everything in the kingdom is relational before it's functional. And I'm going to make sure that my relationship with my kid is right.
Troy, this has been a powerful conversation. You're a very busy guy doing incredible things, doing God's work. So I appreciate you taking the time to be on the Fatherhood Challenge.
Listen, I'm proud of you, buddy. Appreciate your mission, and I stand with you. God bless you so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Fatherhood Challenge. If you would like to contact us, listen to other episodes, find any resource mentioned in this program, or find out more information about the Fatherhood Challenge, please visit thefatherhoodchallenge.com. That's thefatherhoodchallenge.com.